Hi, good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our third webinar of our Global Consciousness series. We have started this series of webinar a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago exactly, following the oil spill in Mauritius. And just to introduce myself, my name is Adish Madhu. I work in humanitarian coordination with the United Nations Population Fund. And so after the oil spill in Mauritius with a group of 4 Mauritians from the diaspora, from Canada, from Ireland, and from the UAE, we've launched a Crisis Diaspora Appeal Platform, which aims at engaging and channeling efforts towards the crisis response. We have, and on our initiative, we have no political affiliation, and the first objective is to support and give visibility to organization and non-governmental organizations in particular, so that we can reach to them and bring a certain number of discussions, expertise, and advisory from the pool of exchange and experts from around the world, in particular from the diaspora, but from the global community as well. So we are very happy today to have on this webinar several key people and high level. The panel is of very high standard, and I'm sure the discussions will be very interesting, especially from the topic that will be discussed today, which will be maritime surveillance and maritime security, and from a legal and law, from the law aspect as well. We are being joined today as our moderator by Mr. Raj Mohabir. Welcome, Raj.
Thank you.
Raj Mohabir comes from the Indian Ocean Commission, where he is the officer in charge and has been holding this position for 20 years now, almost, since 2000. He's an economist by profession, and he was working before with the Ministry of Economic Planning in Mauritius and Development for the Republic of Mauritius. And he manages and oversees probably a lot of what is being done by the intergovernmental organization that takes care of the Southwest Indian Ocean island states. He looks over economic cooperation, trade, regional integration, infrastructure, and, as you would imagine, why, maritime security and blue economy. So we have a very important and very interesting person to be with us this evening. Just to remind you, with regards to etiquette and the way it's going to happen, questions will not be taken directly. If you have any question, please do so via the chat option. Everybody's mics and speakers, only the speakers are heard, all the mics will be muted. So I wish you a very good talk, everyone. I will, without further ado, let Raj start right now. Thank you.
Adish, thank you very much. And thank you very much to Adish and Nalini for organizing and helping to organize this very important webinar. Indeed, I think we have to appreciate the efforts that you've put in mobilizing not just the diaspora worldwide, but also many eminent experts. And I can tell you that in my long experience of working at the Ministry of Economic Planning and at the IOC, I would say 30 years, it's very rare to see high caliber people turning out in meetings. And I see this webinar, because of COVID, being an opportunity really to get, that high caliber people to be around us. So just to start off the session, I recall until now, when there was this piracy issue in 2008. And at that time, the Indian Ocean Commission, which is an intergovernmental organization of the island states of the Western Indian Ocean region, the Secretary General was a CHUAH, and CHUAH was very hardly hit by piracy in 2009. And he told me, Raj, we have to do something about this. And I told him, I'm sorry, SG, but I don't see what is that we can do. We, small regional organization, when the UN came with resolution 81, practically saying that, sorry, even the UN can't do much. Get yourself organized as a group, and then see what you can do. And this is where the group, the contact group against piracy off the coast of Somalia started. So that time I was saying that, what is that we can do? Now I have a totally different view, that indeed we can do a lot. And this is what I wanted to just, in terms of introduction, trying to say. In fact, in the newspapers yesterday, I was saying that one of the biggest challenges that we have now is to leave the ocean as it is right now. The ocean is a no man's sea, is a no man's space. Anyone can do whatever they want. So we have to establish something. And what we try to do at the IOC is to try to get all the countries in the region, even in the international community, to come around and then to establish an architecture for maritime security for the Western Indian Ocean. And if Lanili could just present what one slide that I have, and if anyone is interested, I would request you to get in touch with me to get more details about what we are trying to do. But there is a lot that we are trying to do. Just suffice to say is that we are trying to establish a system that will monitor the movements of all vessels in the region, identify vessels of interest, and then, if necessary, get organized regional coordinated actions at sea to go and check some of the most important vessels. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you, Nalini. I would now go to what my role is as a moderator, is to present the 5 panelists. We have only 1 hour, as you know, at this point in time. We don't have much time, and hence our request is that each of the presenters will be talking between 6 to 8 minutes. And I would really request you all to be, very concise and focus on the main points that you wanted to want to say. And we have 5 panelists. 3 of the 5 panelists will be talking about the surveillance and security issues, and 2 of them will be talking more about the legal aspects and legal perspectives of the issues. And I would like, first of all, to already present the first of the panelists, Commander TORBEN IVERSEN. He's Branch Chief Environmental Response Royal Danish Naval Command. His subject is environmental risk alert and response to operations at sea. TORBEN was the operations officer, chief of staff when NATO commenced counter-piracy operations off the Horn of Africa. He has also been there with Danish warships. The last handful of years, he has been in charge of environmental response for the Danish Navy. So without taking a lot of time, Commander TORBEN IVERSEN, the floor is yours.
Thank you, moderator, for allowing me to talk a little about preparedness, prevention, and response. The ability to handle an oil spill starts way before the oil is actually happening, going into the water. You need to, in advance, have a risk analysis telling you about what are the mathematical probabilities of certain risk types, certain spill types, certain types of oil, and why it would hamper your nature. So for that, you need a risk analysis. That risk analysis would also give you an idea about what risks you face, because Otherwise, there is a tendency that you look towards the previous spill and not the next spill. So you need a risk analysis. When you have that risk analysis, then you should start by thinking about what capacities do I need to handle such spills. And you may have those capacities and you might find a gap, you need to procure some capacities. But being in Denmark, far away from Mauritius, I would say that some of the things that comes to mind are, of course, that you need some booms to protect your coastline. You need some standby vessels to operate those booms to protect your coastline, because that way you can actually minimize the consequences of the oil spill. But if the oil spill gets into the inner waters in Mauritius, then the next thing you need are some shallow water response vessels. I know the neighboring country here, Sweden, they have good experience with that. We just procured in Denmark because it's about vital capacity. And then as the last thing you need in your paperwork, you need to have a contingency plan on how to get rid of the waste. If you have an oil spill of 1,000 tons, then you probably have 7,000 tons of waste, and you need to make sure that you can handle that in one place until you could bring it on further to a facility that would deal with it. But if you have those booms to protect your coastline, then you can think a little bit more negative about your overall procurements. It could be that you would like to enter a regional agreement on oil spill preparedness, because then you can assist each other with capacities once the spill is there and it's lying outside the booms in your country. The regional agreements are the cornerstones in your prevention strategy, but they would also buy you time, because you've already protected your coastline with the booms, and now you've got some time for your neighboring countries to bring their equipment as well and start the cleanup. And another thing that I would like to echo from the webinar last week was that you had a guy talking about shipping routes and moving them further away from the coastline. There is no rationale except money for having shipping very close to Mauritius. The shipping may as well, when they cross the Indian Ocean, be further out to sea, and thereby you will have more time to do whatever you need to do once there is a situation that is in the build-up phase. You will have warning time. So for that warning time to be handled effectively, you need a command and control structure. It doesn't make any sense that you have standby vessels and booms to operate if you don't have anybody to make the decision on whether you actually need to operate the booms or not. So I would recommend you to have a 24/7 command structure with a delegated command. There should be one watchkeeper that's in charge of this. It's not a matter of calling around to see who's available. It's somebody who's always there who makes the decision. And then once the oil spill happens, then I could only recommend you to have some kind of media person that would handle the media, because the worst thing is if media wants to talk to all the responders, they are busy responding. And if you have those preparation issues well underway, then I would like to do a little bit more talk about the thing about getting shipping away from your coastline. Because if you move the shipping out to the open sea, then first of all, you would have more time to do whatever you need to protect your coastline, but it would also give you more time to identify whether there is an upcoming emergency or it's just something that would pass on with no spill. Once you see the ship that leaves the route and is on the way to your coastline, you should start asking questions to it. What's your cargo? What amount of bunker oil do you have? What type of bunker oil? Because oil is not just oil. Some fuel types are very hard to collect. some, and it's especially the new fuel types, the very low and the ultra low sulfur fuel oils, but also the cargo. If it is crude oil, then we have a common rule in my area. You never approach crude oil until it's been out to the free atmosphere for 12 hours, because it has gases in it that are lethal. So stay away from crude oil for 12 hours. You need to make sure you understand and are aware of risk profile. But also, if you've moved the shipping routes out to sea, and I guess there is an IMO regime for doing this, then it would also mean that once you start taking preemptive measures because a spill is upcoming or potentially upcoming, then you have a rationale for getting that reimbursed and pursue compensation for your efforts, because then the ship left what is the normal behavior and made you prepare for an eventual or a potential spill. Then once the spill happens, the first concern for your responders should be their health and safety. Oil is not just oil. If it's crude oil, stay away. Then once you know what you want to do, then the operational speed is vital. What costs you $1 to respond to early in a spill may cost you $10 to respond to in a month, because the oil is spreading around with the currents, with the tidal streams, just going around, and it's also falling to the seabed. Then you should wonder, can I stop the accident? And I guess that was already on the mindset of Mauritius officials for the recent spill. Then you need to have an awareness about your environment. Are there some areas that present higher value to the population, to the nature than others? And then you should prioritize your efforts towards where it prevents the worst consequences. And then one important thing also is administration. When you want to have your money back from the P&I club, then you should be able to document not only what you've done, but why you've done it. Otherwise, they will try to challenge your reimbursement amount, and then, well, they have an interest in saving money. And I'm sad to say, but it seems like from the court trials I've followed, that P&I clubs have more money for lawyers trying to save them from paying money than they have money for paying the actual reimbursement. So for the cleanup and damages. So be prepared for a dogfight in court, but you can avoid the dogfight by being rational in your administration. And then that's more or less what I wanted to say, and then just remind you about shallow water response vessels can operate from the coastline and out, so they can actually clean it just before it hits the sandy beach. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commander TORBEN IVERSEN, for these various steps that we would need to look at. And my assessment, without specifically targeting any particular country, is that very few countries have all the capacities now. What I would like some of the questions to emerge is, if we look at, for example, the last 4 most important oil spills which happened in US, in Italy, in France, etc. How far would you think that these countries, even the developed countries, have all the capacities that you have mentioned here right now? And I think what is very important for this webinar is to give us some guidance on how we could be or should be proceeding in terms of developing these capacities. So I'm not asking the questions now, just keep it for you eventually to respond. I now wish to go to the second panelist, Michelle BOCKMANN, who is from Lloyds list. She'll be talking about what vessels tracking reveals about in the Wakashio. Michel BOCKMANN is a London-based energy commodities and shipping editor analyst employed as markets editor at Lloyds List. She has more than 20 years experience across 3 continents, covering the global maritime and oil and gas sectors. She provides editorial analysis of the energy commodities and shipping markets for Lloyds List and Lloyds List Intelligence. Michel, up to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak. I think Lalani has several slides which will provide a backdrop to my talk. This one here is perhaps the key slide because I'm going to look at AIS analysis, and AIS is the signals that a ship is sending while it is sailing, and it's required under international conventions. And this provides a very interesting insight into what went wrong and when. And what this slide shows is that the key hours are between 10:30 and 13:30 Greenwich Mean Time. So if you add 4 hours for Mauritius, that's between 14:30 and 17:30. And this is when the Wakashio apparently veered off course. And this is where I think investigators will be concentrating their efforts. So what I've tracked here is I've tracked 3 other bulk carriers similar to the Wakashio that were in ballast, that means they weren't carrying any cargo, and sailing for Brazil to pick up iron ore. And as you can see, the green, orange and purple vessels that had also traversed this route in the past 24 hours before the Wakashio had actually sailed quite closely along the same area. But as you can see here on the 25th of July at 10:30, that is where you see the trajectory of the Wakashio start to veer off course and head towards Mauritius. Now, the reasons why haven't been properly addressed and investigated because we've had very little information about any of the 4 concurrent investigations that are currently underway. But that is where investigators will be concentrating their efforts. They'll be looking at the voyage data recorder, which is like, you know, the maritime equivalent of a black box, and they'll be having a look at what steps were taken during those hours. The only bit of information we have so far has been from the Panama Maritime Authority. Now that is the flag administration that is in charge of one of the investigations, because the Wakashio was registered in Panama, which is the world's largest flag registry. So they have said that the deviation that we see here in the red was because of bad weather. That hasn't been confirmed. There have been other unconfirmed suggestions, but we really don't know at the moment. And that is because there are 4, as I said, contemporaneous investigations going on. One is by the flag state, and that will be done under international conventions for marine casualties. That won't seek to establish liability. That investigation will just seek to find what lessons can be learned. There is no deadline for it to be completed. Panama typically hasn't always filed all its investigations to the International Maritime Organization, the United Nations body that requests this. But in this case, I understand that they will. So we've got Panama, you've got the police investigation that's underway in Mauritius. The Mauritius maritime authorities will also be undertaking their own investigations. And the owners, the Japanese owners, are also doing their own investigations. So all of those are happening concurrently. There is an information vacuum. It's my understanding from my research that the voyage data recorder is with the Mauritius police. Whether the contents of that data recorder have been passed on to the owners or to any other people involved in any of those investigations is unknown at the moment. The last thing that I would like to conclude with is that the backdrop to this accident and casualty should also be borne in mind in terms of the crew. what we know is that the master, who has, I think, 24 years experience and has been arrested and charged at this stage, he had extended his contract, and 2 of the other 20 crew had been on the vessel for more than 12 months. Now, this is highly unusual, and this reflects an inability at the moment for the international shipping community to be able to change crew because of so many lockdown restrictions with the coronavirus pandemic. So at the moment, there are about 300,000 seafarers worldwide. It's about 20% of the global population of seafarers who are unable to sign off their vessels, and they have to have their contracts extended. And this has provoked some very worrying concerns about crew fatigue, mental health, and other difficulties in keeping ships sailing safely. Now, we can't speculate as to the cause for this deviation, but we do know that 2 of the crew members had been there for over 12 months, and we know that the master, who was on a 6-month contract, had extended that by 3 months in May. So he was obviously at the end of his contract as well. So the backdrop there is somewhat uncertain, and I think it would be in the interests of everybody involved in the marine casualty if some preliminary findings were released as quickly as possible. It has been done before. There was a casualty with Norwegian Cruise Line back in March 2019, and the Maritime Authority there managed to produce a preliminary report within, I think, 4 or 5 days. So I think it would be in the interest to determine the cause of the grounding or have a preliminary outcome soonest to prevent unhelpful speculation at this point. And I shall leave it there.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Thank you very much for your presentation. Again, I'll be just raising one particular point in your presentation. Has there been in any of the previous records that the AIS system or the equipments in the boat may have been not correct, or that the GPS system or the system that tracks the vessels an error on that? Not necessarily that you should be respond now, just keep it at the back of your mind. Let's go to the third and the last speaker on the surveillance component. And here we have Mr. HENRI de GERSIGNY. He's from Dubai. He's from Tristar Transport Fleet Manager. He'll be talking about the importance of maritime traffic in the Indian Ocean. And he has been working in Dubai. I don't have much information of him, but I can see that he has been holding several important positions in many companies, including Shell and OTH and Shell Mauritius Limited, etc. So, Henri, are you around?
Yes, good evening to everybody. I would like to share just a couple of live on the web. I would like to talk about the position of Mauritius, and for Mauritian people, they know the emblem of Mauritius is a key and the star of the Indian Ocean. The key being has always been a passage for a maritime route. Mauritius has always been on the maritime route for a long time, during the closure of the Suez Canal, and more recently, it came back to activity when you have problems with piracy in the northern part of the Indian Ocean, and the route, the increase of traffic between China and east coast of America. If they allow me to share. do you see my screen? No. Can you allow me to share?
Yeah, Lanini is doing the necessary.
Okay.
You can go ahead, Henri. I've made you as host. So
yeah. Okay. Okay. If you look at my screen now, you will see as we speak today, right now, the traffic that is around Mauritius and Réunion Island, and on a daily basis, it's the same. And you have mostly between the north and south more than 50 to 60 people in the 60 vessels crossing in the near vicinity of Mauritius. What do we have in Mauritius today to control that traffic? As you correctly said, Raj, I was working for Shell for many years, and during my tenure in Shell, I was based in Mauritius for quite some time, and I had the chance to be representing the oil spills response, be representative of the oil industry in the oil spill response team for the government of Mauritius, with the government of Mauritius, for the regional organization, for which we had quite a good approach between Madagascar, Réunion, Comoros. I think there are people from these countries in the web today. And so we had put in place some assistance between countries to manage the oil spill. But today the traffic has increased significantly from the past 10 years to now because of this problem of piracy, because of increased traffic between China and America, as I say. So the traffic is likely to increase, and when you look the difference between the red, blue, and green is the number of tankers, the red tank being the tankers, the green one being dry bulk and containers. But all of these vessels are a potential risk to a country if they are not monitored correctly. What do we have? What do we have in Mauritius today? I can't comment on that because I don't know what we have, what has been developed. But there is a number of means where it's the control as for the traffic in the area, where we could control the access to a country and limits the zone to which intervention is required by voice through communication, and at last minute, even in the key areas like in the south, where we had the accident of Wakashio, we used to have a base for the Coast Guard there. I personally had to go early morning once at 5 o'clock to see a spill which was supposed to be approaching Mauritius, and within 2 hours we were 60 kilometers out of at sea. So these facilities were there, so I don't know where it is today to be able to intervene. And what are the controls? Who is monitoring? What are the system of monitoring? I can't comment on that, but I think it's something that really need to be looked at for the future. What happened today, we can't change it. But what will happen tomorrow, we can change, we can protect ourselves. We need to realize that the Wakashio is one incident, but 2 years back, we had another incident in the south of the island. Similar, but where Mauritius was a bit luckier, where we had no spillage. The vessel we managed to remove the vessel and take it out. Unfortunately, it sunk, but we managed to take the vessel out. So I think Mauritius need to be aware of this traffic and be taking care of how to protect itself and how to monitor and control this traffic around the island today. Because it's not going to reduce, it's going to further increase. Second thing, and which has been talked out, is about the seafarers. Today, it's possible, I don't say it's a case, but it's possible that one of the reasons for coming closer to Mauritius is for the seafarers to have communication facilities. This has been said in the press, but I don't know what is coming out from the investigation. But this is reality, is that seafarers are suffering, as been said earlier, for more than a year. And relief of seafarers is almost is very, very difficult. In Europe, it happens. In some countries, it does happen. I can tell you in Mauritius, it's not happening because I have a vessel operating there and people with more than 1 year on board not being able to be relieved. And this is only increasing the number of accidents that we have around the world. I will share with you another screen, which is showing you just in the past month, what are the number of incidents that we had. Just in the last month of August. Okay, again, 1st of September, we had another grounding to Turkish freight. And I would have a special word for those 4 Mauritians who lost their lives today in the accident of a tug, which was pulling out a barge from the incident site in Mauritius, of a Wakashio incident site, and it's seen where it's already where the vessel sank yesterday on the 31st. So this is another incident, but I don't think it's related to third seafarers. Tanker incident in Falmouth. We had another police freighter accused of non-authorized anchorage in Vietnam. Okay, this is not really. Another incident of grounding, which is happening in Latvia. So if you go like that, you look at the number of shipping incidents and accidents that are happening, it's increasing every day since the last few months. And because of that, I think the Mauritian waters are going to be more exposed. And we really need to do something about it. There's something to control the traffic around Mauritius, and because the risk is going to just continue to increase. That's what I wanted to say to you today. And again, before we leave, I'm just ready for these 4 families who lost their seafarers on board the ships today of a Naval tug.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Henri. First of all, I would, if you can just transfer the host to Lalini, please, because if not, you won't be able to organize that. Thank you very much for all your points that you make. Of course, that have lost the close. And it's true that the latest information out of the 8, 4 people were out on the sea, 3 found dead, 1 is still missing. I don't know whether they've they've got the first one. Anyway, very important points you made about the seafarers. There is, I do know that there is Chirag Bhari from ISWAN who is listening to us, and we will definitely raise that issue with them after the webinar. You have mentioned about the increasing risks. It's true. It's not just that there are more vessels passing by. We all know that the Western Indian Ocean region now is host to more resources in sea. One of the largest stock of gas under the sea is found off the coast of Mozambique. There is oil that have been found, so we should be expecting more activities at sea. Very right, but more importantly, Western Indian Ocean, I would say, in terms of the geopolitics, is one of the most active for many reasons. I won't go into the details. You mentioned very rightly about how to do the tracking and of the vessels around the islands, not just Mauritius, but it's true. And it is very interesting. For example, when I once visited Singapore, I was seeing how in a small port of the Singapore, at one particular point in time, there are something like 800 vessels, and all of them, come and go on a daily basis without. So I think there are, new technologies and systems that we can use, and this is what exactly we are doing. We are trying to get done in the region. You're right saying that there were many initiatives in the region, but then, the problem is that until there are projects, the activities get on, but once the regional projects, are stopped, then the whole process and the whole momentum stops. So these are the kind of things which are very important for us to learn from the lessons and then take it from there. So thanks very much. We had 3 panelists who have been speaking about surveillance, and now we will go to the other component of this webinar on issues of legal importance, and we will have 2 speakers, Dr. Jason CHUAH from City Law School, City University of London. Dr. CHUAH, if the floor is yours. Professor CHUAH is an RFRSA, is an associate dean and formerly head of department. He has held scholarships from Barclays Bank and the UK Overseas Development Authority at St. John's College, Cambridge University. He was the holder of the Cambridge Commonwealth Trust Award. Jason is the executive director of the London University's Maritime Law and Policy Group and has been nominated 3 times for the Oxford University Press Award for Best Law Teacher of this year. There is a lot of long, extensive CV of Dr. CHUAH, but I'll let him now to take the floor and talk about the legal implications and the legal issues from his perspective. Jason.
Thank you, Raj. Thank you for that very kind introduction. I'm quite aware that I need to be expeditious in my talk, and taking the expedition theme, what I like to do is really to concentrate on some of the more expeditious matters for regulatory reform for the International Maritime Organization. Now, so what I don't want to get into in this very short talk are the more politically charged and more politically controversial areas for reform. I know that there has been a lot around, the flag state responsibilities. We have seen how Panama has reacted to press reports and social media about the criticisms that people have been making concerning flag states. Now, I'm leaving all that out because I think what I like to concentrate on, as I said, is this issue of what are some of the quick gains? What are some of the more expeditious areas that we can reform following the incident around the Wakashio? So, however, Lalina, if you could just run through the first slide.
Henri, have you? Okay, that's done. Thank you very much.
It doesn't say very much on the first slide, so I'm just going to go over that very quickly. So the first slide basically says, as all lawyers would, we always like to make sure that conditionalities and provisos are added to our presentations. And so my little proviso is that this is an evolving story. So things have yet to be entirely confirmed. Facts are still very gradually emerging. And quite a number of assertions which have been made and propositions which have been made are largely matters of some degree of speculation. And so, as TORBEN earlier commented on, getting the press right is also really quite important. But I also appreciate that very many people will want answers. They would want, sort of accountability at this very early stage, and sometimes that is not easily achievable. And as lawyers, we often get asked, so who is liable, but until the facts fully emerged, it is always going to be very difficult to lay blame or lay culpability or lay liability on any particular individuals. So my comments today, as I said, will largely focus on what regulatory changes could be perhaps executed, could be introduced as part of the IMO reform agenda. However, Lalina, if you could run over to the next slide, thank you. However, it has to be said that if you look at the title on my slide, I underlined the word worth, because there are some battles which are not easily winnable, and they could take a long time. And this concept of expeditiousness or expedition is always going to be much more challenging from an international regulatory body's point of view, such as the IMO. So, you know, even though, as far as I can tell, these are some of the more expeditious changes that we can introduce. Expedition, of course, as a descriptive word, is always open to some degree of interpretation. But anyway, I have decided to focus on just 6 areas of reform. The first is one which has been raked over and tilled over since literally the early reports of the Wakashio came to light. That is the limitation of liability regimes. We all know that there are 2 systems of law governing liability in such an incident. One is the CLC Convention regime, which covers basically tankers, and the other that covers other vessels, and that is largely provided for in the Bunker Convention and its subsequent 1996 protocol. Of course, we know that the limits are quite different between the 2 regimes, and there has been, I think, an outcry as to whether the Bunker Convention is still fit for purpose, and there have been an increasing levels of concern that the limits are not quite right, and people are clamoring for higher limits. So that's an area of law that needs to be looked at. I've also identified 2 other areas in the Bunker Convention which should perhaps be considered as part of this mix. One is concerning the types of vessel. Sometimes, you know, the concentration is very much on tankers and non-tankers, but of course we need to bear in mind that maybe not, you know, off the coast of Mauritius, but in other parts of the world, you also have got oil platforms. You may have got an oil platform which is being towed. You may have a fixed a fixed rig, for example. These things are not necessarily covered in the Bunker Convention, and they're not covered in the CLC Convention. So there may be an area to look at unifying this system. Right, moving swiftly on to the next aspect, which I consider to be interesting and noteworthy, and that is concerning the Ballast Water Management Convention. Now, we all know that ballast water, again, you know, you will have picked up from TORBEN's presentation earlier, how ballast water is really quite an important aspect of the whole salvage, the whole recovery process. We need to bear in mind that ballast water is not unnecessarily dumped into the waters. Or dumped into the ocean. Now, the law, as far as this is concerned, that I deem worthy of looking at, states that these records do not need to be electronic. Now, of course, if you are trying to make this early and quick response that TORBEN talked about earlier, you need for this information to be readily and very quickly accessible. So perhaps the convention needs to be tightened up to make sure that these records are not only provided for in paper form, but actually in an electronic manner as well. And also, the law says, and this is quoting from the law itself, the volume of ballast water on board should be estimated in cubic meters. That is fairly obvious. However, it goes on to say that it is recognized that the accuracy of estimating volumes of ballast is left to interpretation. Now, I think perhaps we need to look at this again. How much interpretive flexibility should there be, given the importance of ballast water in, say, in the situation of the Wakashio. This leads us on to perhaps a rather controversial subject, and that is the sinking of a vessel which has been grounded. Now, if you pick up the Mauritius Times, for example, you will find that there to be a number of reports expressing concern that there is a lack of transparency in how the Wakashio is being taken, where is the new dump site, all that. I think that needs to be looked at. And at the moment, the London Convention and the protocol do not provide sufficiently as regards the standards of identifying, say, dumping sites, for example. And it also takes the precautionary principle, the polluter pays principle, but there is no fleshing out as to how these principles should manifest themselves in practice. Now, the fourth item that perhaps is worth considering is this idea of the new fields that the IMO is very keen to promote. Again, Torben talked about the VLSFO that the Wakashio was carrying. Now, of course, we know that the new fuels legislation and regulations, as far as the IMO is concerned, are largely to do with emissions and the burning of these bunker fuel, etc., etc. However, perhaps a new dimension needs to be had given the Wakashio's situation. How do we perhaps we need to take into account the impact of these new fuels on the environment should there be a casualty, such as the Wakashio. Now, we know that bunker fuel could be burned off, whereas VLSFO cannot be easily burned off and could actually cause more harm to the environment should there be an accident. Now, lastly, two very quick points because I know my time is up. The Marine Accident Investigation System. This is a matter that Michelle alluded to. Now, at the moment, there is one which has been ordained by the IMO system, and that is the Flag State Investigation System. Now, we know that that is not for the purposes of identifying liability, but there is no requirement under the current system that the IMO has established requiring an accident investigation body to evaluate the sensitivity of the environment in which the accident occurs or damage to that environment. So perhaps we might want to think about changing that. Last but not least, this was a matter that I was demonstrated by Raj's first slide for us, and that is perhaps looking at regional cooperation. Now, it has been raised by Raj that developing countries may not have the expertise, may not have the technical capacity to provide speedy responses. But perhaps this is where, having an integrated regional oceans cooperation center might help resolve that challenge. So with that, I'm going to close. I have taken about, I think, 9 minutes. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jason. Very good presentation, very focused. Thank you. And what I take up from your presentation, very importantly, and I think you concluded very well, is the issue of which battles countries like Mauritius will have to fight. How do you choose which capacities you would need to develop? And to be very frank with you, I have been following up these all the issues around Wakashio. It's a very complex question. I don't see how we can, but you concluded very well. Maybe we have to look at that in a more comprehensive manner and look at what practically we can initiate. And this is what exactly I was trying to allude to, and you referred to it. Now, our last speaker is Dr. Robert VERSHICK. He will be intervening on assessing environment damages and lessons learned on legal claims in the BP oil spill. Now, what is important in his long CV, for me to inform all the listeners today, is that Professor VERSHICK served in the Obama administration as Deputy Associate Administrator for Policy at the US Environmental Protection Agency in 2009 and 2010. And in that role, he helped develop climate change adaptation policy for the EPA and served in President Obama's Interagency Climate Change Adaptation Task Force. In the fall of 2012, he researched climate adaptation policies in India as a visiting scholar at the Center for Policy Research in New Delhi, supported by the Fulbright Nehru Environmental Leadership Award. Robert, it's up to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll try to be brief, and I'll tell you the issues that I think are most important. First of all, I think that Dr. CHUAH, I couldn't agree more. We need a lot of reform in this area. We need to pick our battles, and I think that the limits on liability are one of those key areas. I might also add, I think the method of transporting heavy fuels still in single hull ships. My own view is I think that's something that that should be looked at as well. I'm going to talk about some of the laws that are in play, what types of damages are available, and how we should be, to my mind, working carefully on trying to establish what the measurement of those are. And then I'm going to talk just a little bit about the sinking or the scuttling of the ship, which is a concern of mine as well. We've talked a little bit about the laws in play, and Dr. CHUAH is right. The laws like the Civil Liability Convention, the Bunkers Convention, these are the laws that would apply to individuals, to private parties like the ship owners, for instance. And the good news with those laws is they're no fault, which means you don't have to prove that anybody was negligent or did anything in particular wrong. But the bad part about it is the limits are just ridiculously low. And we found the same thing in our own domestic laws in the United States with the BP oil spill, and essentially had to negotiate out of them, but that was a domestic issue that President Obama actually, was able to take care of in some ways, although I don't think as sufficient as it could have been. I'll just point out that there are other international laws that would apply to nation states. They're long shots, but it's good to know they're there. Rules from the Convention on Biodiversity, the Montreal rules, there's customary law about not doing harm to nations. These might arguably apply to Japan, to other parties, to Panama, for instance, if there was enough information to show that they failed to notify in some reasonable way or provide information or to do as much as they could or should be expected to do in helping and containing these. And of course, there's national law too, which I'm not versed on in Mauritius about tort accident law. In the United States, for instance, we have a lot of laws that come into large play there. There's several kinds of damages, and I want to point to some of these because it's extremely difficult to establish them sometimes, and that's a problem in this area, particularly when you have laws like the CLC or the Bunkers Convention, which first of all limit you in terms of making your claims and the time available to measure the claim, and then also as I say, really the paltry limits on those claims make it very difficult. Environmental damage is one type of damage, and then of course there's property damage and economic damage. The environmental damage can last for decades and decades and generations. The Exxon Valdez, which ran aground in 1989, that area still hasn't recovered in some ways. The thing to keep in mind in measuring this, though, is the damage that ideally we're looking at and that the law requires us to look at is the damage to the production of the ecosystem itself. And so while we tend to, in the news, measure these things by dolphins killed, number of shorebirds poisoned, length of shoreline despoiled, what we're really looking at is the ecosystem as a whole, because ecosystems do shift, and you can have a diminishment of a certain kind of species and still have a productive ecosystem. Obviously not always, but so we're looking to see sort of what that is. But what's difficult about that is that marine ecosystems are on their own highly naturally variable. And so that poses a problem for lawyers because those who are trying to establish what the damages are will always hear from experts on the other side saying, oh, you don't know it was because of that oil. It might have been because of changes in climate. It might have been because of other contaminants coming from other industries on the island. It might be, a natural event of some kind. And so often what we do in measuring that is we try to compare post-spill, pre-spill data. We try to compare contaminated areas to uncontaminated areas. We try to track things over time. The socioeconomic damages are really difficult too sometimes. I mean, if you just think about the industries involved, fisheries and tourism, right? Those come to mind, although tourism is going to be tricky because in the COVID era, it's hard to sort of know what your baseline was in tourism. But think about industries on the island that use water, right? Thermal power generation of electricity, for instance, desalination plants, anything that draws water may be affected by this, may have to shut down, may have to make other contingency arrangements. Power generation on the island could be affected. Desalination could be affected. Agriculture could be affected. And how do you show, again, right, that whatever the effects are were reasonably taken and can actually be linked to particular things that are there. There's also social and cultural loss, obviously. In Louisiana and in the Gulf area of the United States after the BP oil spill, we had a number of Vietnamese American communities, for instance, which were subsistence fishing. And they used fish that they caught for cultural ceremonies and things that were extremely important in their lives, in their religion, and in all kinds of ways. And to the degree that there are going to be claims by subsistence fishers, right, in Mauritius, or if there are other kinds of cultural related claims, monetizing those things, showing that they matter. In the BP oil spill, they were asking for receipts, right? We're trying to compare a self-caught fish to one that you could buy in a Walmart. And so those things are very tricky, and they can really degrade, I think, diminish the meaning of some of these economic products. Just the last thing I want to say about the sinking of the ship is there has been a lot of controversy about it. I obviously don't know as much as I wish I knew, or I think a lot of people do, because it doesn't seem like there's been a lot of information out. But this front section of the ship was deliberately sunk in 2,000 meters of water or so. There's law that would govern that, and it's important to know whether those laws were followed. You can look at the Maritime Pollution Treaty. It's called MARPOL. But the ballast water, if it was still in that ship, is going to be a big concern, as we've heard. Residual cargo in that ship, not just oil, but other things, iron ores or whatever else that this carrier might have had in previous transport. And the vessel itself is a toxic object. The metals and so on, and the residue from the anti-fouling systems that are sprayed on the outside of the hull to keep things from growing on it. All of this can be very, very harmful to an environment. And I know in the Pacific Ocean, south of Hawaii, where I've also done research, there are a lot of wrecks that have been removed at significant cost from the ocean floor because of all of the contamination down there. And so, the parties involved could be many. Mauritius itself, right, that particularly seems to be supervising or overseeing the scuttling of that ship. Japan, to the extent that its people were, its experts were involved in the planning. Panama, of course, whose flag is flown over the ship owners. And importantly, a lot of contractors are involved in all of this work. The cleanup and the scuttling of the ship, and on and on and on. And they're all on the hook too, legally speaking. So it's going to take years just to, I would think, untangle the web of people who are responsible. And then it's going to take many, many years to understand the damages that have occurred both socially, economically, and environmentally. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Robert. Thank you indeed very much. Your last comment, I would take it because it came as a comment from one of the participants who was saying that damages are not short-term, these are long-term, and it's comprehensive. And according to Vikash Tataya from Mauritius, he's saying that there are some experts who are just trying to claim that they know many of the impacts are short-term, which is not. So we have several questions. First of all, I would like to inform everyone, because that was a query, that the webinar is recorded. So I would leave it to Lanini or to Adish to tell us how that will be shared. There will be also presentations that can be shared. Henri, if you can send also your presentation to Lanini. There was also some queries about some people who are doing studies like PhDs and who would be interested to see anyone who would be willing to be, one of the interviewees. This is from Therese Canning, so Lanini will deal with that. There are two key questions on which I think which are very important, and I'd like to raise, and I'll leave it for each one of you to say what you think about it. First is, and what I see as the most important one is that why is it so difficult to establish state responsibility? Why is it so? And the second one is that the issue of the damages and the complexity, as you have put it very rightly, Robert, it's very complex. In fact, I mean, you're an expert, you put it very simply, but it's so much work and loads of work to try to establish the impact on each of the areas, get all the justifications and the proofs, and then go and demonstrate that how small countries like Mauritius, Seychelles, Comoros, etc., which have very small internal capability to go around this. So how we have understood the issue, how do we see to overcome this? So I don't know who would answer the question about the difficulty to establish states' responsibility, but Robert, you will be one who try to respond to the last question I raised.
Yeah, well, there are. I'll boil it down to two reasons why it's hard to get state responsibility. One is that area of law is pretty vague, because it has to do with what the duty of care is by a state, and depending on the laws that you're looking at, that level of care can vary. And it's meant to be that way because it can be highly debatable in that. The second reason is that holding a state responsible means getting a state into some kind of a tribunal or venue that will recognize it. And particularly if you're talking about some states that have large political powers in the world, they can, sort of negotiate outside in order to decide whether they're going to be complicit in any kind of a program like that. So those are the reasons that state responsibility, in a nutshell, are difficult.
I'd like to chip in on one of the questions from Iswan, who is trying to tell me in a long query is that that many such wrecks can be, you'll find the captain or the stewards, getting long sentences. It means then that you recruit people and you get them to pay, and then, others don't pay, don't really pay for the real loss, what's happening. So this is also another query. So this one, the other one with respect to how to go around trying to get long-term damages from small countries like Mauritius. I don't know who will respond. Henri? No. Robert? No. I know these are very complicated questions. Anyway, we've gone 10 minutes beyond our time that was allocated. We have had, of course, very short presentations on very complex matters, but at least these presentations have helped us to try to focus on some of the very important key issues which we will take forward, because this webinar was not meant to get some responses and answers to complex questions, but to take those questions forward in a way that can get us somewhere at some point in time. So what I would do now as moderator, I'll stop here and I'll hand back to Lanini or Adish to conclude and to move forward.
Thank you very much, Raj. And I must thank each one of you, Commander Torben, Michelle, Jason has already left, Henri and Robert. Did I forget you? No, I think I did not mention you yet. Thank you very much. I mean, Raj working on at the Indian Ocean Commission will definitely understand the broader picture and stake in terms of the integration of the mission control, the example of the mission control in terms of surveillance, but also the capacity to monitor, the capacity to anticipate and react, as Commander Torben was mentioning, when necessary, and to monitor from far the movements of vessels and the increasing number of vessels coming and traffic coming in our region. We want these webinars to be very precise, of as most useful as possible. And I think we've, from what we've listened today, it has been extremely interesting with key issues raised with regards to the claims, with regards to the environmental impacts and how to assess those impacts. I was talking yesterday to Vikash Chataya, who's on the call listening today. Coral reefs being affected. How do you understand and assess and monitor the impacts on coral reef? And these would be seen over years. It might not be seen today and not even be measured today, but over the years, the growth of those corals and the health of those corals would be surely affected. Same could happen for the population, and assessing that with regards to the COVID era is also a complex situation. So thank you very much. I will leave the floor to one person from our team who's been there from the start, who's been maybe backstage, but everything that you've seen in terms of the all the what was on our platform, all the images, all the graphics, all the posters, and also really on the thinking of creating our platform is Malini Virasamy McDonald, and she's online from Canada. It's probably early in the afternoon or still in the morning where she is. So I will let her give a couple of words on our next steps as our initiative is moving forward as well. Malini, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Adish. As Adish mentioned, I am Malini Virasamy McDonald, my married name here now. I'm one of the 4 founding members of this Crisis Diaspora Appeal Group. It is in the middle of the afternoon here. I just wanted to offer a word of thanks to all the expert panelists who have joined in the past 2 actually webinars, as well as this one, of course, for participating, but also mostly for sharing and being so willing and open to share your expert knowledge and advice and lessons learned through your experiences in these webinars. The purpose to this platform, at least our group, the whole intent behind it was to create an environment. It was our way of lending a helping hand, is creating an environment so we could gather expert knowledge and resources and information from those who have gone through it in all corners of the world, so that we could use for our own use in Mauritius, given that we've never gone through anything like this there before. So that being said, the whole purpose with gathering this information is also to relay it back to the island. So the hope is that this information is taken and is used by the right people, the right groups, and the right individuals to help in the long run, whether it's short-term or long-term help that we need. and they will need it. The next steps, as Adish mentioned for our group, this is the third episode that we have done weekly now of these webinars. The next one, we will be hosting another one in a few weeks, and that information we'll be sharing online as we've done with the other ones with everybody through our platform on Facebook. And the topic we're looking to cover will be about communication and transparency, and which we feel is a pretty important subject to talk about, actually, in light of what's happening on the island. So tune in. We're going to be sharing the information the next short while, at least in the next few days or perhaps a week, weeks when we develop and have confirmed all of our expert panelists on the webinar for the next one. I also want to thank all those who have tuned in, particularly the Mauritian diaspora from around the world, but also to thank them for joining what we've started was also a database of experts, of Mauritian experts around the world to basically sign up in our database, and for us to give us the ability to link them with the right people on the island, given that they have the knowledge, the know-how, the expertise. It's their way of also helping. So we have to date approximately about 80 people have signed up, and we are looking to, and we're in the process of going through that list and linking them with the right people on the island so that they can offer assistance as well. So we're doing everything we can to also work at a distance and help our homeland, which it's a bit difficult when you're not there. You feel somewhat helpless, but this is our way of trying to be those voices and try to offer the help where we can. And with that, just our whole premise with this was that knowledge is actually, it's quite powerful. So any information we can get and pass along, the better for home. So I think that's it from me. I'll pass it back on to you, Adish. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Malini. Let me pass the closing remarks now to Raj. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Adish. Thank you very much, Lalini. That was tremendous, and thanks very much to all the speakers. Adish has said that we are following very closely all these discussions, and I can only tell you that these are not words that is being just lost. Words can get lost. We say what you write remains, but we are getting it recorded, so it won't get lost, and we will take action on that. I would invite anyone interested to look at the IOC website, and what I would call upon all those who have expertise, because this is the main issue, to give us a hand to really get things done. Our aim is to stop this no man's sea, to be a region which is controlled just like our land territories are controlled. We should come up with new regulations at regional and international level to stop this ocean being a free zone for anyone to do whatever they want. So we have to get on board on getting things done, and I will really need your help, all of your help, and I will rely on Malini, on Adish, and on Lalini to help us get into contact with you all, and one point in time or the other, we'll get back to you. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much. So we will close now, and we hope to see you for our next webinar.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.